survey among 1,000 Malaysians found that many still puts the blame on women for domestic violence and rape. The report by Women's Aid Organisation highlights how victim blaming is still prevalent among society and that there are instances where violence against women is still accepted. Here to discuss more on the issue is WAO's Anis Farid.
Understanding of what violence against women is on the most basic level is quite high. But then when you break it down into everyday situations, most of our questions were somewhat situational, meaning they were asked in a way like sometimes a woman can make a man so angry that he hits her without meaning to, which 43% of Malaysians agreed to, or women who flirt all the time are to blame if their partner gets jealous and hits them, which 1/3 of Malaysians agreed to. So with these types of questions, we're probing at how people may understand violence as just an emotional reaction. And when we see something as a reaction, we see it as an action that someone has no control over.
Many Malaysians, she said, still do not have a clear understanding about the complexities that surrounds violence against women. This stems from being conditioned at a young age to normalize violence when it is an emotional reaction.
I think it has to do with how insidious and normalized these things are and how we're potentially taught to think like this from a young age. So we're taught that anger is an acceptable reaction to jealousy, for example, even when we recognize that slapping, pushing, or hitting somebody is wrong. And when we see something as just an emotional reaction, we frame it as, oh, they just overreacted, they didn't mean it, which is also why over 1/4 of Malaysians find domestic violence forgivable when it arises from someone getting emotional. And when we do this, we're shifting blame from the perpetrator to the victim because it's saying you should have known how they would have reacted. You should have done something different, which is essentially expecting the victim to do something more to manage the reactions of the perpetrator, which is textbook victim blaming.
With COVID-19 causing a surge in violence against women, Anis calls for action to be taken immediately.
With WAO's hotlines, for example, following the onset of the pandemic, we received upwards of a 3-fold increase in calls to our hotline, and our rates of these numbers, they have not dropped to pre-pandemic rates as of yet. So this shows now that now more than ever, it's important to address these issues. It's not going away. In fact, it seems to be getting worse. So more needs to be done now.
To prevent normalization of violence against women, the first step is by challenging attitudes that endorse violence. Anis outlines more measures that government can adopt to better protect women against violence.
We need a comprehensive prevention campaign strategy which involves collective action. At the same time, we also need to frame our prevention campaigns around challenging the prevalent problematic attitudes. This is one of the biggest strengths of our survey, is that we've been able to identify which myths are most prevalent in society. And now it's just a matter of addressing and debunking these. Further to that, though, we do need more data, and we need this data to be collected periodically. So the Australian National Community Attitudes Towards Violence Against Women survey, which our own survey is based after, they do this every 4 years. And when you do this, you can see whether your prevention efforts are working based on if people's attitudes are changing over time. So the more data we have, the clearer our picture will become, and this can feed into our national prevention strategies. We actually recommend that the government take up these efforts as part of the National Action Plan on Violence Against Women. The thing is, these are collective efforts and everyone needs to be involved. Attitudes do not and will not change overnight. So we need to be consistent and proactive about these issues. Ultimately, all of us need to recognize that it's our collective responsibility to do better and move towards that as a society.